Okay.
Well, hello and welcome back to our podcast, Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy and the Integration Process. So today I'm so excited to welcome Alan and to have this deep dive into how he changed his life with the help of the Mother Ayahuasca and find his purpose, and now helping other people, to do the same thing through various offerings. And I'm just really excited to dive into the treasure of knowledge that he has and to share with you guys, some really good little hidden gems that you can take away from this conversation. So stay till the end and stay tuned, and welcome, Alan. So nice to have you here.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you for asking me. And let me know if any time you can't understand me because of my accent.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think I'm gonna be fine living in Ireland for a while. So yeah, just a very technical thing. When we finish talking, let's just mute ourselves so the possible background noise is not gonna disturb the recording. Okay, so my first question to you, Alan, is just obviously what I always ask from people, that how did you meet the Mother Ayahuasca, and then what happened in your life when you made this encounter?
Yeah, okay. I'll start a little bit earlier than that. I started my spiritual quest. It was actually a hero's journey where I left England, where I was born at the age of 28. I was suicidally depressed, and I was guided. I have a spirit guide that I've been working with since then. His name's Amantane, and he guided me on my spirit journey around Asia for 18 months to find the source of happiness, if it was even possible. And I did find the source of happiness. And I found that as happiness grew, my depression lessened. And I am not depressed now. I haven't been depressed for over 30 years, thankfully. And I'm happy. I've been happy for 30 years. So when I actually discovered ayahuasca, I was already happy. I didn't come to ayahuasca out of desperation or, deep sort of transcendental issues. I really came to ayahuasca because I was interested in shamanism. So I got interested in shamanism sort of from a younger age. I didn't know it was shamanism, but I was going off on these adventures into the cosmos in my imagination from the age of about 18, following taking LSD quite regularly. And it sort of showed me that there was these other realms of, parallel universes that was completely new to me from being raised in a strict Catholic sort of upbringing. And so I would go off on my little adventures in the mind, and that eventually led me to realize that I was doing shamanic journeying. So I was interested in shamanism, also Buddhism, and different developing positive states of mind, whatever that entailed. And then in 2005, I went to live in Peru. I'd already spent a year traveling around South America in the late 80s and hearing about shamanic practices, but I didn't really explore the plant kingdom and until 2005, when I decided to go to Peru to get better with my Spanish, and also to really delve deeper into South American culture and traditions. And so I went to Peru with that intention of understanding the culture a bit, but also the shamanic side of life there. So that was 2005. So it was very specific. I wasn't just looking for ayahuasca ceremonies or experiences. I wanted to see how it tied into the sort of the other shamanic work or practices that I'd already been doing for probably about 6 or 7 years up to that point. And then the journeying for much longer, since I was a late teen. So that was really what brought me to it. But when I went to Peru, I'd actually recently, prior to that, developed tinnitus, which is a very loud ringing in the ear, and it was sort of freaking me out. So I did specifically go to ayahuasca to find if it could help me with my tinnitus, which was a bit, really not allowing me to have any peace in my mind or tranquility. And it was also stopping me from doing meditation because I couldn't concentrate or focus on my meditation practice. So I wanted to see if I could resolve that. And that's why that was kind of like the medical reason why I wanted to experience ayahuasca.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I also had a medical reason. So I'm curious just to fast forward like more than 15 years, how is the tinnitus now? Do you still have it?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I do have it, but and I was shown in those initial ayahuasca experiences that my tinnitus wouldn't go away, but my life would be very different. I didn't know how. In a way, the tinnitus was a gift that had brought me to ayahuasca, and I would learn to manage it. But interestingly enough, I was in a ceremony. I took a group down to Peru last year, maybe I forget now, maybe a little bit longer, and 18 months. And I was actually told that I was going to work on my hearing in that retreat. And so that was with a Huni Kuin and Maestro Page called Bure. And so I did. I focused on my hearing, and it did get better. And the ringing's still there, but my hearing got better.
That's so interesting. Do you think that this is still, you are in a process of a learning experience and it is still unfolding, or did you receive any information about what is the meaning of this, that this is going on for so long?
No. Yeah, well, when I went to see the original shaman, I went to see his name. All I know him as Maestro Pedro, and he was on the outskirts of Cusco. I was introduced to him by a herbalist, a Peruvian herbalist that I'd become friendly with, and all I knew him as Maestro Pedro, and that was in 2005. And so I went to him and I said, the reason that my spiritual practice was on the decline was because I developed tinnitus, because I couldn't focus on my meditation, Buddhist meditation practices. And he said, okay, yeah, all right. So he worked on me. I went to see him many times while I was down in Peru. And he said to me one time, Alan, the tinnitus happened because you were losing interest in your spiritual practice. It was kind of like there to bring your attention back to it. You were blaming the tinnitus, but actually the tinnitus developed because you needed to have your attention drawn to the fact that you were not being focused in your meditation practice, etc. So it was actually the opposite, and he sort of pointed that out to me. So I'd say that's probably why I developed tinnitus, and now I see it as like angels just singing in my head.
Wow, this is so powerful, and I can relate, to the experience of something turning out to be the opposite, and the challenges turning into gifts and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think that especially when we are working with the Mother Ayahuasca, this oftentimes happens, that there is such a shift in perspective, that something that we looked at the enemy before becomes a friend or an ally in some way in the end. And you talk about this in your book quite extensively, that there is really a couple of core problems that manifest in a myriad of ways in people's life as dysfunction or illness. Yeah. And I really resonate with that, and that's something I found in my practice. Would you like to share a little bit about what are those that you found that those core issues, and how does that relate to healing in general, and how did you discover this through your own experience?
Yeah, sure. Good question. In a way, it is the core of the human experience, that we have these conditions that deplete us, but they happen because we are energetically depleted. So I'll speak about them in a minute, but I'll just speak more about the shamanic paradigm, about why we experience unhappiness or sadness or limited mental states or belief systems or physical conditions. They all come from the same thing, which is soul loss. So you've heard of soul loss, and basically soul loss is one of the three main reasons why, from the shamanic perspective, we get sick or out of balance. And the primary one is soul loss. The second one is power loss, and the third one is I forget the third one now. Anyways, it's like animal power that has been depleted from us, so it'll come back to me, sorry. But so what happens when we have soul loss is we are energetically depleted, but we also disassociate. That's known more in Western terms as disassociation or fragmentation of the psyche. And when we're physically and spiritually disassociated or mentally dissociated, we're out of balance. And so when we're in those states, we are, with our diminished power, we are not operating from full power base. So we receive information that is usually causes us to fear life. And the original trauma that caused the original soul loss tends to be the most powerful fundamental reasons that we're disassociated, but also out of balance and energetically depleted. So from the shamanic perspectives, you have to reverse that. You have to bring the power back. But also what happens that when you're energetic, when you have soul loss or you disassociate, something fills that space. So that energy goes somewhere outside of your energy field, but something else fills that. There can be no vacuum in the energy field, and that thing that fills it is can come in as a neutral energy, but it can also come in with belief systems or thought forms from others around you of influence, which is generally your parents and your culture. So those thought forms come into your energy field, and they hold a particular sort of vibration or frequency of, let's say, your parents' thought forms, or anger, your father's anger, your mother's shame or doubt, and so you hold that, even though it's not harmful, intended as a harmful sort of like intrusion. It does hold the vibration of the originating cause of the soul loss. And so you're held with that. It becomes you. It becomes like a little voice, a diminishing voice in your life. And those diminishing voice, because it's a different vibration, usually a lower vibration than your own, holds limiting beliefs such as you're not worthy. And so the two primary causes of sickness, whether that be mental, emotional, physical, is you are not worthy and you are not safe. And the reason that you don't feel safe is because of the conditions in your life that cause the originating soul loss. And so we hold these patterns in our energy field, which becomes interpreted through our imaginal faculty as those two primary things. One, you're not safe. Two, you're not worthy. And what that means is you are not worthy to be loved. And so you go through life until you get these resolved. First of all, feeling unsafe in the world, which means that you operate from a place of hypervigilance, extreme hypervigilance, and all the belief systems that develop out of this hypervigilance state. And the fact that you're not worthy to be loved means that you're not worthy to operate from a place of deep belief that you are a divine being, and religion and culture will play into that as well. But so that's it. And when you operate from a place of love and safety, which is my work to help people do that, your life is a different life. You see yourself from a place of being good enough and safe enough to do anything that you want. And those diminishing voices, I don't say that they go away, but you can elevate yourself from a place of confidence and power to not hear them, and for them not to have any influence on you. So that's kind of like a quick overview of my philosophy, but also based on shamanic cosmology and belief systems.
Yes, thank you so much. Wow, this is so deep. I think we can go into this really deeply, but let's just say to our audience, maybe to understand it a little bit better, that what you are talking about, and that shamanic language, when you say soul loss, is basically when something happens. For example, you are a child and your parents divorce, and you too little to cope with that experience and that grief, and you decide to push that away and put it in a box somewhere, and you kind of, that's what you said, dissociate, and not process that experience, just kind of try to separate from that. And then this keeps happening throughout our life, and everybody does this because it's a type of survival mechanism that happens. And then, as you said, when you don't have power, you absorb dysfunctional coping mechanisms from your environment, from your family. You're trying to balance yourself out unconsciously, but we don't know better, so we are normally trying to do that in some dysfunctional way unconsciously, and then that generates like more problems, and then it just this like a downward spiral of you keep losing your power and your balance and your groundedness and your confidence and everything. And those voices that you refer to, that we internalize and we allow to enter into our heads, get louder and louder and can totally take over, sometimes and drive somebody's life. And that would be, very much out of balance. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, and I think that this constant epidemic of anxiety and depression and things like that is definitely signs of what you are talking about, that most people live in a survival mode, like our nervous system and everything, and we operate from, we stuck, in that state. And of course there is no, then you struggle, the struggle for survival. That's what's happening. And recently I read this quote that so resonated with me, and it said that at one point of your journey, you have to let go of the person who you needed to become in order to get here, who is a survivor, because you needed to survive, right? And you need to let go if you want to thrive, if you want to, change and have a different experience. You need to let go of that identity, that person, that behavior. And that is a big undertaking, to get to that point, because at the end of the day, what we are talking about is a total denial of truth, which is that you are a divine, all-powerful spiritual being, that would be an opposite of I am not worthy of love, which is not even making sense, because you are out of love, made out, so it's just, it would be that complete dissociation and disconnection from our true nature or who we really are or whatever, and then we suffer the further away from we are of that true nature that is, comes out of love and safety that you mentioned. The more we keep suffering and the closer we get, back, the less suffering and more happiness it is, as you said. And I think that's the purpose of all spiritual and healing practices, to kind of get back to this, I don't know, remembering, or how would you call that? How did this happen to you? If you can summarize a little bit your process, that I'm sure that you were not aware of all of this, when you were younger. So how did you kind of become aware of this, so to say?
Yeah, well, I just want to comment on what you were saying. That we have our true nature, and our true nature becomes sort of distorted, what we believe our true nature to be, and so we sort of make up our true nature based on our past experiences. Our life is defined very much by our past experiences, and we believe that is how the world is. And so we have to prove that we're right, or we have to live in a world defined by our belief of how the world is. And so that's why we develop these coping mechanisms or belief of the world, or, let's say the victim, archetype. We develop all these things because we believe we are a victim because we have been victimized. But if we didn't have soul loss, we wouldn't believe it. But we believe it because we're much more vulnerable and exposed to believing diminished patterns, because one, we're not worthy, and two, we're not safe. And so we believe things that the world isn't safe, and we have to continually prove that the world isn't safe, and we have to continually prove that we're not worthy to be loved, because that's our view of who we are, because we've been hypnotized into those beliefs by our life experiences and our past. And we're, in a way, our sort of natural propensity believe negative patterns, because we're human, and that just tends to be what we do. But, my own journey, I was guided. I was suicidally depressed. I was going to commit suicide this particular day in, was it 1980, 86? I was 28 years old, and I heard a voice say, "Do you want to live or do you want to die?" And I'd never heard anything like that before. And I was like, "Who was that?" I was on my own in my apartment in South London. And I said, "Well, I want to die." And, this voice again said, "Do you want to live or do you want to die?" And he actually showed me in saying that, how to access a part of myself that I wasn't used to accessing, which was my heart center. I operated, generally people that hypervigilant or unsafe or unworthy operate from the head, and they think themselves into oblivion and desperation. And I was suddenly shown how to access my heart center, and I was like, oh my God, this was a gentler relationship to myself than I could ever remember having. And he showed me that. This has all happened in a split second, and I thought, I want to live, but how do I do that? And this was, it was a very transformative experience, and I had enough awareness to know that this voice was wanting the best for me. And I didn't know whether this voice was my higher self or an internal voice or an external voice, but I didn't really care at that point. And I just said, well, show me how. And he told me, he said, you've got to leave England and you're going to go on this journey around Asia for 18 months. And this, I'd never even barely left England, gone to visit my mother's family in Ireland pretty much, and so to leave England for 18 months and go on a hero's journey before I even knew that was a real thing, I said yes. And I actually quit my business and left England and decided to start my journey in Asia, because I kind of figured that Asia was a really spiritual country, and I would learn a lot there about myself and the religion other than Christianity, which I'd been brought up in. So I heard this voice, and his name's Amantane, and he's been with me ever since, guiding me. And he showed me how to live a life, or what I needed to do. Anyway, certain challenges I had to go through to strengthen my spirit, to elevate myself beyond my limiting belief and patterns of my life. And I couldn't express it in that way then, but now looking back, that's what he was showing me how to do, and to start to think more positively, to start to stop being so self sort of limiting by being hypercritical of myself. Because if you're depressed, you're hypercritical. The two go together, and you're just not good enough, and it comes out of not feeling good enough. And so I had to learn to stop doing that, and that was really something that's the journey I walk, and why I'm not depressed anymore, because I look at the best and highest version of myself most of the time.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's very fortunate that you had this part of you, or this entity, or this angel, or whatever, who is guiding you and was guiding you for a long time on this path. I also want to add that we don't need that. I don't want people to think, that you need a spiritual entity to guide you or something, because I think that, as I said at the beginning, that we all get to the same place, and now you can support others, and there are many human teachers as well who can help people, and it's not everybody's path to have this type of guidance that you received, and I just want to say to people, don't have the expectation that this is the way it has to be my awakening, because it's different, and there is so many ways, that brings you to the same place. And that's very much like what I learned through my work with the medicine, and also with many physical teachers and healers and spiritual teachers who affected me, right, and who brought parts of the messages and things like that. And that's why I'm so dedicated working with this plant, because I really feel that she can bring us to the root of the problem and see what is really, because so many times I've been therapist for over 20 years, and I see people having so many therapy and healing and workshop and reading the books and everything, and their life changes very little. Maybe there are small changes, or maybe there are some temporary changes, and I feel that this is because the things are not uprooted, that we are making changes, trying to make changes on the surface, but we are not dealing with the real problems because we are not aware what the real problems are. So I think that is such a gift of the medicine, to help us to become aware what the real problems are, so we can really start to focus on it and do what we need to do to to uproot them and to change them, and it is possible, and you and myself are a demonstration that it's possible to do that. So tell me a little bit more about, because most of this work happens in the integration and not in the ceremony, because it's not kind of like a 24-hour job to do this, what we are talking about. So what is kind of your best way to go about it, or what would you recommend to people who are like, I really resonate with this, I want to overtake this journey and prepare for the best and take the best out of it?
Yeah. So do you mean how do I encourage people to approach ayahuasca ceremony, or how do I help them out following the experience with ayahuasca?
More like the following, yeah, when they already been through and now the real work starts.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk a little bit about the ayahuasca ceremony that I write about in the book. And one of ayahuasca's greatest attributes is to help you to strengthen your spirit. Because when you're physically depleted or disassociated, your spirit is compromised. Your spiritual energy is compromised. Part of it has fragmented. And so what you can do actually in the ceremonies, you can prepare the landscape inside of yourself for that spirit part to come back. You can do your own soul retrieval, but the landscape has to look different to the landscape that existed when the soul part left, because there's obviously a reason why that soul part left, and that was a coping mechanism of your spirit. It didn't feel safe in that environment, so it left. So what the ayahuasca ceremonies can do is they can actually help you to recreate the landscape to be one that spirit part or soul part will look at and go, oh yeah, I'm ready to go back now. And part of it is to actually to strengthen yourself, strengthen your character, strengthen yourself beyond the point, and face your fears, so that you're not afraid in the way that you were afraid prior to going into the ceremony, even though it doesn't feel like that. The fact that you step into that battle, in a way, that psychological battle, you're already sort of making the statement, okay, I'm going to do something fundamentally different in my life to change my life. And sometimes, as you well know, there's a lot of fear-based experiences that happen in ceremony, and you don't necessarily know why they're happening, but ayahuasca knows that she's doing that. She's giving that opportunity to strengthen yourself, to create the internal environment where you don't have to be in fight or flight mode all the time. And when she sees that, that soul part, she'll help to create the environment for that soul part to come back. And what integration, that can happen in ceremony, but you don't know it. The integration part, in a way, affirms that and allows the soul parts to fully integrate with your support. And so that's really what, from the shamanic viewpoint, is happening. The integration is the reintegration of that soul part that left all those years ago. But you have to continue to affirm, no, I am safe. I am safe. I am not the little child that was 4 years old that when that soul part left. I'm an adult, and I have full autonomy and full sovereignty to live the life of my choice. And I'm here, as the adult, operating from my heart center, to let you know, little soul part, that I can take care of you. And so that's really what the integration is, the integration of that soul part.
Okay. And what is your point of view on the integration process after the retreat or the ceremony that people go through, and how, they can be assisted on this?
Yeah. Well, as you said, in a way, there's like universal wisdom around how integration happens, and that there's very obvious ones, be more self-reflective, be more meditative, make clearer choices in your healthcare and the things that you recognize weren't working for you before, to change them. So to support your goals with changes that are necessary to support those goals. Things don't just happen by magic. You have to. The integration is a slow process. It doesn't just happen by magic. And I know a lot of people come out of ceremony and they make these big claims about what they're going to do in their life. It's really a better process and a much more likely process that those changes will integrate in a way that is actually healthy and helpful. if you do it slowly, and it filters into your whole every cell of your body, and it filters into your energy field, and so you become it. You embody it, and when you embody it, and you're fully convinced that these changes are who you are, you start to see the world in a different way. And so the integration process are sort of reflective, kind, gentle, soft. And I use different processes. Definitely the creative process is helpful, because when you're tapping into the creative process through doing artwork, writing poems, or writing generally, or doing any sort of art form, you feel it. You don't just like slap paint on a canvas or make a bowl. You actually, your whole body is involved in the process, and it's done in a way that is your exciting way. It's a way that influences every cell of your being. So definitely engaging in processes like that. And one of the things that when you're disassociated, you're out of balance. And so ultimately you're out of balance with nature, because you are nature. And one of the really important things with the integration process is to get back into balance with nature, which means getting back into balance with yourself, because you are nature. And so spending time in nature in a much more mindful way than you may have done, like going mountain biking is one way, but to actually lie face down on Pachamama, breathing into Pachamama, and hugging the trees. And it sounds very hippie, but really the trees are the healers. They know what to do when you ask them for it. There's this divine intelligence in nature that it's very sort of co-creative. And for example, even exhaling your carbon dioxide to offer it to the tree as payment for the healing that the tree will give you, and in return give you oxygen, life force. So have this sort of sacred reciprocal relationship with nature is allowing you to harmonize with that which you are, which is nature. And so to develop a new relationship with the natural world, and it's very difficult when we live in concrete, but you have to take time to life. I love to tell my clients to lie face down on the earth. How often do you actually lie? You usually lie on your back looking at the sunbathing or something, but to actually lie face down and hug the earth with your open arms is a very powerful thing. And the thing is that the earth is also Pachamama. Will take your density, what's known as hucha, will take any density that you still want to purge from ceremony, and she will transform that as compost into food to feed you. And so that is the balance of nature. It's a sacred thing that we're all part of it, and we're all involved. And that is one of the most powerful things that you can do to actually restore balance and integrate, to recognize that you're part of this universal field of awareness and consciousness that is creation, and to act more creatively, I'd say, in relationship to yourself.
Yeah, so well said. Do you think that people need an integration guide, just as they have a guide in the ceremony, maybe in the preparation, that it is necessary, or it is important that people have a kind of a professional container and guidance, at least for a good amount of time, until they kind of settled into that new type of being, that new way of seeing, and anchored more there? Or do you think that people can just do this on their own and investigate how to do it?
Yeah, both definitely. I know when I came to the medicine, I was already in my mid-40s, and I was just thrown into the lion's pit in a way, without knowing anything. I hadn't done much reading about ayahuasca, or certainly in traditional indigenous ceremonies, there is no talk about integration. There's no sort of real preparation. I didn't even know about diet, when I went in for my first ceremonies. So I didn't have any background. I just would say, bye to Maestro Pedro after the ceremonies, and then see him a few days later. And there wasn't really too much talk about what had happened, in between my visits. So that tends to be the more traditional way, because it's part of the culture, right? So, if you grew up in a Hunikuan village in Acre in Brazil, you're exposed to ceremonies sort of every month when they do their big village ceremonies of 150 people. It's just part of your life. But in our world, it's not part of our traditional culture. And so it's much more important for us in the West, definitely. And I just happened to be in my mid-40s, and I'd already had a very strong Buddhist practice. I'd been on this spiritual journey, for how long? Like 20 years. I'd say I was fairly spiritually, and I would say fairly emotionally immature, but my wife at the time probably wouldn't agree with you. But anyway, so I'd sort of learnt a lot in life about, being human and being on the spiritual journey. So I didn't know about integration, but I'd also done, mushrooms and LSD and stuff. So I didn't really need psychedelic integration in the way that, say, a 25-year-old might need it, who hasn't been exposed to as much of life as I had at the time. It's definitely helpful to have a human if they're willing to commit to that. I mean, I have led a lot of people through ceremony. Very few of them have actually sought me out to do follow-up integration work. I tend to just do my healing sessions with them, which kind of operate as function as integration, but very few of them, even though I have offered it, we do sort of like WhatsApp groups and Zoom groups and things like that, but individual work, not so much. But having said that, they would benefit more from doing it.
Yeah, I so agree with you, because I had similar beginnings in Peru that nobody told me about integration and nobody talked about that topic over 10 years ago. And I agree with you completely that they don't need it because they are in the context, they are in the culture, it's part of their culture, they're understanding their worldview. But we are so alien to this, and then we come in and have these experiences, and then we go back. A lot of people go back, they have this culture shock, and I think that it's very beneficial for people. And my specialty is the integration, is the pre and the post. That's what I'm more passionate about. And I do a 1-year integration, like weekly sessions for a year, like a deep dive. And I have just such an amazing results with this. And so I came to believe through this experience that you can really go as deep as you want to go, even after one journey. But sometimes I think people still continue to need some help, especially at the very beginning. They start working with this medicine because it's not like any other healing methodology, it's not how it works. It's very symbolic. Then you have your blind spots that's very hard to recognize, and there is a lot of pitfalls, as well as you also mentioned in the book. So I do recommend people from the West who go back to the West or live in the West, that definitely best thing you can do is to have an integration therapist for a good while until you.
And the other thing with, so let's say, indigenous cultures, I've spent a lot of time in the Peruvian jungle and in the mountains I also work with Wachuma, San Pedro. And speaking of which, Wachuma is an amazing integration tool. I don't know if you worked with Wachuma, but Wachuma, I often do my retreats ending with a Wachuma ceremony, because it actually is a big part of the integration of the ceremonies prior to, that we've done prior, the ayahuasca ceremony. So people don't need as much help if they've done Wachuma. Anyway, so it's important, and so the indigenous cultures, they think differently. They have different rationale. They're not thinking about traumas and shadow work and things like that. It's just life is life, and there's all these entities out there in the spirit world, in the jungle, that are sort of influencing their life, and they have to protect themselves, or they call them in, or they engage with the different herbs and plants, in a much more sort of real way than we do in the West. In the West, we're much more sort of rational, linear, and so we have different ways of absorbing it. And because it's so new to our culture, we don't understand it. We don't understand the process, but we think it. We think our way to through life, and so when a lot of these energies come up, that are being released, we maybe internalize them. Like, if anger's being released, we go, oh, there's anger, and you start to do that sort of monkey mind dance, where you're thinking, oh, you're angry, and all the reasons you're angry, but actually it's being expelled. And so it's very helpful through that process to help people know, no, you're actually they're coming up to be released and be healed on the way out. They're on their way out, let them go. But because we're so used to sort of internalizing these sort of patterns, we bring them in and don't allow them to be released. And so we feel like nothing's changed. And so it's very helpful through those processes, through the releasing process, to have exercises and help to just be willing to let them go. And unfortunately, because we have habituated ways of behaving, we believe that is us. We grasp onto it, because otherwise who would we be without it? So just encouragement, support, an accountability partner to actually help us to move the patterns and see things in a different way to the way that we've seen them all along. And the ayahuasca ceremonies are like this beautiful milestone where you can start to move in a different direction. You've gone through this, whether it's very powerful or fearful or very relaxed. It's something you chose to do to change your life. So why not make the most of it? And, having somebody to help you to make the most of it, we'll see the greatest change, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely see that in my practice, that obviously we suppress things and dissociate from things that we don't want to see, feel, acknowledge. There is a reason why. So it can be quite a lot of resistance to kind of allow them to actually to be released, to be let go and to be processed. And or, simply people just too afraid to go there because they feel that they're going to be overwhelmed and they won't be able to handle it. And definitely this can happen, emotional flooding, spiritual emergence, things can definitely happen that can be very scary sometimes if you don't know what's happening or what is that you are going through. So thank you for pointing that out. And I really love that, and I think it's so important to talk about that this individual healing work and that developing that right relationship that you mentioned to ourselves, to our body, to our mind, to our emotions. First and foremost, and then to the Mother Earth, towards other people, towards all our relations, right? To change this, because we are in the wrong relationship. That's why we are fighting. That's why we are suffering, because we are in a state of war. That's a wrong relationship to be in, right? And we to be in right relationship, it means to do that with ourselves first, to be a right relationship, which means to love and accept yourself, first, and do that work with yourself, and then it will be naturally, that would be expressed in your outer world. And I think that we have to emphasize that this is a service work for humanity. You're not just helping yourself having a better life and more happiness and more joy and maybe being an inspiration for the people around you or a help or motivation, but you also just really tipping that collective scale, to help us to get back into that right relationship that I think, everybody recognizes that we are a little bit sidetracked there. And I feel maybe that's one of the reasons why this medicine is spreading like crazy. I just read that the number one keyword search within psychedelics is ayahuasca retreats. So there is, a huge amount of interest. And I was wondering, maybe because I see a lot of people go through with this medicine of this correcting their relationship and finding that love within themselves and therefore changing their life completely, and that leap of faith as well that you mentioned earlier. I think it's so part of the process. I mean, you just left your life and went to Asia and then went to Ecuador, and I mean, you completely have a different life, and I went through the same thing, right? And you need to make that leap of faith to get to the other side. And I think
have an action plan, right?
and I think a lot of people are very afraid, and you can get help if you are afraid, to help you release and face some of the fears, and then you will be able to make the leap, and then your life really going to change. And fortunately, there is not a safe way. I don't think there is a safe, you have to just make the leap. What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, and if you don't make the changes, nothing changes. I speak a lot in my book about actions having consequences. So one of the first Buddhist teachings I learned, which really shaped my life. And if you follow a particular pattern and there's a certain outcome that comes from that behavior, if you want to change the outcome, you have to change the behavior. And it doesn't happen without those changes. And also to change the behavior can be a leap of faith. It can be scary. How many times have you heard somebody say, "Oh, I'm afraid of my power"? I hear it a lot. "I'm so afraid of my power." So they can see their power. They have a sense of it, but they do self-diminishing things to keep themselves small and limited because they're afraid of who they really are, their divine self. And so ayahuasca can actually show them through some of the spiritual expansive relationships and in the entheogen to see the God within. They can see that there's nothing to be afraid of with that power. It's actually a beautiful thing. And when they experience, wow, this is actually a beautiful thing, then they're more likely to move towards that light than to sort of keep themselves in the dark. But sometimes it takes a little bit of coaching. So what did you do this week to move out of the dark and into the light? And they coexist. The light and the dark, they're coexisting. You have a choice to make within yourself. Do you want to move to the light or do you want to stay in the dark? And the dark is still there when you move to the light, but it doesn't influence you. It doesn't affect you. But you can just sort of wave at it, say, "Hi, I remember you, but I'm in the light and I'm going to stay here and I'm going to do whatever it takes to stay in the light," which is what I've done. And I've made massive choices in my life, but with confidence, never with fear, always with confidence. And ayahuasca gave me that, so I'm grateful.
Thank you so much. Yes, I thank you for sharing. Do you think there is something to it, that the Mother Ayahuasca is like going everywhere in the world now to maybe help us to...
She definitely has a mission. She definitely has a mission. And if only she can spread in a way that it sort of isn't abused or misunderstood, it would definitely be helpful. Because a lot of people, if they're in situations in ceremonies where they're not being well taken care of, they can disassociate further. So ayahuasca is not always used for the right reason. It's a powerful energy, powerful vibration, and it can be used for bad as well as good. So it has to be sort of monitored. How she has to be involved in how she's used, and not just be thrown to the masses. So it's important to have podcasts like this so people can hear what's involved, but to be cautious in where you drink. Like I know people drink. I've heard of people drinking ayahuasca at Burning Man. With like 80,000 people, raving, and it's just not a good environment. It's not safe and it's harmful. So you have to be careful because you're emotionally sensitive when you're on such a powerful entheogen, and so it can and she can be used by sorcerers as well as she can by healers. So it has to. I think it has. She has to be contained and controlled. In areas where it's safe to use.
Yes, definitely. I would love to have you for another conversation more about the dark side of and the brujeria. We already have episodes about this, so check out. I think episode 36 and 37. We have 2 episodes of the abuse of power and the dark side of plant medicine, but we always, sharing more content of this to keep the awareness of the people. As you very well said, she's a neutral tool. She's nor good or bad. It's how people use it and what they use it for and with what intention. She is a very powerful tool, an ally, in any way that so people have to be aware, because I think definitely most people assume that she's a healer, all good, that nothing bad can happen. It's a good spirit, so to say. So we're gonna come back to that in another podcast. So stay tuned for that. And just to finish off for today, Alan, if you want to share a little bit about your offerings and what are you up to right now and where people find you if they want to work.
Thank you. I'll show you. I have my manuscript, my finished manuscript of my book. It's called Alchemical Ayahuasca: Take the Journey from Depression to the Sweet Spot. And it's coming out on September the 29th, so very soon. So working quite hard on that for the last 18 months. And really what the book's about is my spiritual journey, some of which I spoke about today, and my introduction to ayahuasca, and ways to work with ayahuasca, how to benefit the most from them. But also the last part of the book is healing techniques. So I'm a healer. I earn my living by doing healing work and supporting people in their healing process. And what I learned from ayahuasca through early on, primarily through one man. His name's Don Ignacio Duri. He's now dead, but he was in his 80s when I first met him in Peru. And he was like the Zen master of ayahuasca. And his ceremonies were very gentle. And I was like, he's not even, is he even awake? And I realized, well, no, he's the Zen master, so pay attention. And what I learned out of it was that, ceremonies didn't have to be that hard to benefit. And it was like a metaphor for my life. Like, life doesn't have to be that hard, does it, Alan? Wake up, and so my whole ethos was transformed through those ceremonies and through the ayahuasca approach, where she didn't have to give me hard ceremonies for me to learn. And I don't have what I would say hard ceremonies. I have ceremonies where I learn. So I'm being taught how to use her as a facilitator, but also as a healer, how to help people to heal. So she's taught me how to help people heal. And what she taught me is that we choose the hard path just by default, in a way, because of our early life experiences, and that life, the world is not safe and we're not worthy to be loved. So we develop all these belief systems that we're a victim, or we're going to be abandoned, or when we're doubting our potential. A lot of people I work with, they want to be healers, but they have training after training after training, but they don't actually step out into the world because they develop these belief systems that they're not going to be worthy to do it, and help people. So I help people to learn the easy way to live. That it's actually a life in flow, a life where you don't have these energy blocks that are resisting life, but also containing the patterns that have, in a way, hypnotized you to believe that you're not safe or you're not worthy. So the book is very much about that. It's about how to live a simple life. And the teachings are very simple because they can't be complicated. I can't teach about living a simple life and teach them, complicated methods to do that. Everything's very simple. It's kind of like, we know it already. We know all this stuff, but I just sort of like put it into like this 200 plus pages of understanding. Oh yeah, it's simple. Some people say, oh, it can't work, it's too simple. And that's just resistance, And so how do you move to a place of recognizing that simplicity is the most powerful way to live? And so I help people with that. I train people in that. I do what I call shamanistic Reiki trainings in Ecuador, where we live now. We're creating a retreat center. I also teach Reiki. We do breath work. I use breath work a lot. A simple breathwork technique. It's not hyperventilating. It's a very gentle breathwork technique. And we also do ceremonies down here. And we're starting to work with indigenous locals that I want to help support on with their livelihood. And also my own learning. So that's what we do. We operate in Ecuador. We still function. We have kind of like a satellite in Mount Shasta in Northern California, where I had a retreat center for 7 years, Sacred Valley Spiritual Retreat. And we've now moved to full-time, more or less, with the retreats down to Ecuador, the Sacred Valley retreats. And so you can contact me via my website, which is sacredvalleyretreats.com, spiritwisdomhealing.com, and also this book, which comes out, Alchemical Ayahuasca, the nice quote from Graham Hancock at the top there, to learn more about what I do and just really learn that life doesn't have to be that hard.
Definitely. And I had the honor to read the manuscript, and definitely I recommend that anybody, on the plant medicine path can benefit a lot of reading this book, and we always learn from each other. So thank you for your offering. Thank you for your service. And I would love to have you back, for another episode, because there is a lot to talk about, of course, and this is a way of also trying to educate people and share good information, that can assist hopefully many people. So we are relying on you, our audience, to share this podcast with your friends and to like and subscribe to our channel. And also let us know if you have any of these beliefs that I'm not safe, I'm not worthy, and I don't deserve to be loved, and how much you operate out of these beliefs in your life. And are you ready maybe to take a leap of faith and move to the other side? So please let us know where you are in your journey. And if you have any topics you want to hear about, also you can send us a message. And the last thing I want to mention is our teacher training coming up for ayahuasca integration. So this is for integration facilitators that is coming up next year. And we have the early bird till the end of this month, till the end of September. So go to my website, Avatar Healing Arts, and training /training program. And that's where you find the information, and come for a discovery call if that's something that resonates with you. So thank you, Alan, and hopefully we'll be back soon.
I hope so. Lovely chatting with you, Nina.
Yes, so nice to chat with you, and have a wonderful day, everybody. Lots of love to you all.